Crazy cat mass murderer. I don't usually do this, but this has traumatized me for a while, so I'm gonna get it out of my system. When I was 16 years old, I lived in a rural area in England, in a small village if you could call it that, as it was nothing more than a bunch of houses with a small store. The closest school was the next town over and was half an hour away, so every morning I would have to get up at 6 a.m. to catch the bus, and yes, it sucked. But it wasn't all bad, because of the two other kids who lived there, who were close to my age, Connor and Courtney. Courtney was a year below me, and Connor was in my class. We got the bus together every morning, and over the weekends and holidays, we would hang out together at each other's houses, or loiter around the shop until we got kicked out. Anyways, at the time, I had a cat, which I had gotten for my 15th birthday. His name was King because he looked like a king. He was a huge white cat with green eyes and an attitude. I loved that cat so much, so when he went missing it fucked me up pretty good. I spent weeks crying my eyes out waiting for him to come home, but he never did. Soon, it began going around that a lot of the neighbors' cats had been disappearing as well. None of them had been found on the roads, so people assumed that a fox had got them. It was the weekend, and me, Connor, and Courtney had decided that we were bored of hanging around Courtney's, so we decided to go exploring and then try to find our way back. It was stupid but fun. Anyways, we were going up a back road we had never been to before when we came across a path leading off to the road. It was unkept and looked like somebody hadn't used it for years. We went down the path excited to see where it led, and we were even more excited when we found an old rundown house at the end of it. The door was open and barely standing. Connor carefully moved it aside and we went in. The smell was putrid, and I'm pretty sure I retched a little. Everything was filthy and falling apart. Just being there gave me a weird sick feeling in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. Courtney must have felt it too, because she immediately began complaining that we should leave. I would have left if I hadn't been trying to impress Connor, who at the time I had a huge crush on. So instead of agreeing with her, Connor and I called her a pussy and teased her until she agreed to come with us through the rest of the house. We went through what looked like to be the living room. It was covered in dirt and piles of trash. The smell got worse. As we made it to the bottom of the stairs, Courtney made it clear that she didn't want to go up there, but when we told her to wait for us, she made it even clearer that she didn't want to do that either. So we all went up together, Courtney clinging to my arm and me clinging to Connor, who went up first. At the top of the stairs, there was a corridor with about 3 rooms. It was just as filthy as downstairs, and the smell was 10 times worse. We piled into the first room we came to, pushing Connor in first, only for him to freeze. I looked over his shoulder and nearly puked. The room was full of decomposing bodies of what looked like to be cats, all piled up against the wall. The stench was horrendous. I heard Connor whisper, "Oh shit," under his breath, and I guess Courtney, who was outside the room, heard because she too loudly began asking what it was. But before I could tell her to shut up, from the corner of the room came something flying through the air. It hit Connor straight in the chest and fell to the floor. It was a decaying cat corpse, and it was followed by a deranged scream of "Get out!" And from out the same corner stumbled a filthy old man. He began to stagger towards us. We immediately got the hell out of there, and I don't remember much about it other than me and Courtney screaming our heads off, and me tripping over one of the door frames on our way out. We ran until we couldn't run anymore. Luckily, we remembered our way back, but it took us at least 30 minutes to get back home, and in that time, we walked as fast as we could, jumping at every sound, and of course, on my part, crying, as I repeatedly asked him if he thought my cat was in there. Connor just kept replying that he didn't know, and asked me if I thought the man had followed us. We finally made it back and ran to the closest house, which one of us lived in, which was Courtney's. We heard he explain what happened, and Courtney's mom called my mother, Connor's mother, and then the police, who came by a couple hours later and took statements. Connor told me that they came back a few days later and said that the cats were there, but there were no signs of the man. When I was visiting my mother earlier this month, my boyfriend and I went to check out the house, but it had been knocked down. I have no idea what that man was doing there that day, or if he had killed all the cats, but I have a feeling that my cat was somewhere within those corpses, and it still makes me sick to this day. There are some messed up people out there, so weird, crazy cat murderer. Let's not meet. Boy with a sharp knife. This happened almost 2 years ago, back in 2014. Some background here. I only knew this guy as a friend of a friend, and we didn't talk often, but I'd seen hanging around my friend I'll call Caroline for now. This is how it began. It was a geography lesson. At my class, we were in the computer lab to do some research. We were allowed to sit anywhere since the seating plan hadn't been arranged yet. Since I wasn't very popular, and my friends would rather sit with their groupies who didn't really like me, I just sat wherever. Usually a person was forced to sit next to me because there weren't enough seats. The guy I'd seen hanging around Caroline sat next to my right. Let's call him Harry. About halfway through the lesson, he asked, "Hey, can you help me?" I turned to him, and see he's smiling as if he'd just been told a joke. I said something along the lines of, "Sure, what do you need help with?" I assumed he meant his computer, but here's where things got weird. "I'm desperate," he says. I reply, "For what?" "A girl. Will you go out with me?" I hardly knew the guy. Also, this came out of nowhere. I doubt he even knew my second name. I rejected him and returned to my work. A few days later, though, he approached me in the corridor with the same smile on his face, except this time it wasn't expectant like before. He put his hand inside his jacket, as if reaching for something in a pocket. "I'm going to kill you," he says, still smiling. I genuinely thought he was joking. I reached inside my own jacket, pulled out a pen, and held it like a knife, comically. I laughed and walked past him. He never took his hand outside his jacket, though. The next day, there was buzz going around that Harry's been kicked out of school. Curious, I asked Caroline why he'd been kicked out, but she seemed really upset and only told me he brought a knife to school. My stomach lurched as the truth hit me. He'd meant it. What he said in the corridor. But I come home, I tell my parents, and my dad goes ballistic. He phones up the school, and as the conversation went on, his expression changed from anger to concern. I asked him what he had said. The head of the year was shocked to hear that I was a victim too, and he hadn't known about it. He said several students had run and told the teacher after Harry had threatened to kill them, and had brandished a sharp knife at some, but I hadn't because I thought he'd been joking. One of the scariest things was, what would have happened if I had reacted differently? Harry had the chance to attack me when I walked past him, but he hadn't. It was surprising, the head of the year said, because Harry was usually a good kid. Now, I wonder how many of my other classmates are insane. Harry has since moved to a school for troubled children. I was actually a bit afraid to post this in case he should see it, but something reassured me the chances of that are 1 to 1,000,000, and he lives far away, which I got from Caroline. The Crazy Christian. Back when I was 7 and in 2nd grade, my mom was going back to work and decided to arrange for me to carpool with another girl in my grade. We became friends pretty fast, though I really didn't like her brother and I really disliked her nanny. Her mom was also working a pretty demanding job and had hired a nanny to take care of the kids. She was nuts to say the very least, and while I couldn't have realized it at the time, I'm positive now that she had been a former meth user. She had wild, unkempt hair, physically looked around 50, though she was probably closer to 30 years old. But what I remember the most is she had nasty, rotted teeth. My friend's brother made a habit of belittling her for it. Looking back, I have no idea how she was able to get the job, but maybe it had something to do with her being incredibly religious. While in the car with her, she'd constantly play Christian music and talk about being a good Christian. I wasn't particularly bothered by this, though it was annoying. One day, my friend and I were talking about Harry Potter. It was just starting to get big at that point, and the nanny, while going full speed on the highway, turned around and started screaming at us that Harry Potter was evil and would make you do drugs and drink alcohol. This is pretty upsetting for a 7-year-old to hear. I told my mother about it that evening, and she reassured me that it wouldn't, and that if she brought it up again, to say that it was just her opinion. Besides her unwarranted hatred for Harry Potter and her nasty arguments with the brother, I still managed to deal with her. Until one day. On that day, my friend's brother was being his usual asshole self. I don't remember what he said, but whatever it was, it really set her off. So she drove into the not nicest neighborhood and screamed at him to get out. Though he was a pretty awful person, he was only 11 or 12 years old at the point. But I think he was just really glad to have a chance to get away from her, so he obliged. She drove off, and my friend got upset, saying we needed to go back and get him. The nanny, being the insane person she was, didn't turn back to get him until we'd driven for about 5 to 10 minutes. So of course he wasn't where we'd left him. We got out and started looking for him, but my friend was very upset and yelled at her for basically being an awful person, and that she was going to run away. She told her fine, so my friend ran off, leaving the two of us. She grabbed my arm and hauled me up the street, saying we were gonna find a good Christian home that would take us in. I just wanted to go home and was seriously wondering why I'd opted to stay with her and not go with my friend. My memory is pretty fuzzy at this point, but my friend managed to find her way back to us, and we were driven back to her house. And the nanny went back and eventually found the brother. I told my mother about the incident, and after the school year ended, I never carpooled with them again. Follow your get, don't stop the car. This is my first time posting, so here goes nothing. So this happened about 10 years ago, when I was a freshman in college, and I just started dating my boyfriend. He lived a few towns away from me at the time, and I was taking some of the back roads towards the parkway to get home. I had fallen asleep at his house while watching a movie, so it was about 3 a.m. and I was exhausted. I knew the way to the parkway well enough, but I am still not that familiar with that particular part of town. As you get closer to the parkway, you have to actually cut through a park to get to the entrance ramp. That being said, there are very few lights and the nearest house wasn't far, but it was totally out of sight. I pull onto the short road and see a gold sedan stopped in the middle of the road. It was actually stopped in a way that it didn't matter which way you were traveling, it was going to be a squeeze to get around him. Just for a little background, I'm very small, and at the time I might have weighed 100 pounds and I only stand at 5 feet tall. So I slowed my car down and I'm trying to see if I can see headlights coming from the other direction so I can pull around him. But before I can make a move, this tall man runs around from the front of the stopped car and starts waving his arms to get my attention. As I mentioned, I'm small, young, alone, and it's 3 a.m. There was no way I was going to stop for this guy. He didn't look worried. He didn't even look that scary, but an alarm went off in my head that something wasn't right. I tried to inch up so I could pass him, but he stands in front of my car and is not going to let me pass. I quickly lock my car doors. He starts trying to talk to me, and he's now making his way over to my window. My hearing isn't very good, but he was so close to me that I could read his lips. He was asking me for help. He wanted my cell phone to call someone. I said that I was very sorry, but no. He had his hand on the window. Please. I said no again, and didn't care if I ran his foot over, I just left. I was starting to get scared. I was able to just barely pass, but had to do so in the coming traffic lane. I look in my mirror and he's just standing in the middle of the road, staring at me. I could see the anger on his face in my brake lights. I pulled back into the right lane, and as I did, my headlights catch 3 men climbing out of the bushes. They were all dressed in the same black t-shirts and jeans, and they were all glaring at me. I could almost feel the anger radiating off of them. I gunned it and flew up the road and onto the parkway. I could feel my whole body shaking. What had just happened? What were they going to do if I had stopped? I pulled out my phone and called the police. They had to transfer me a few times because no one could figure out if I should be talking to the county police or highway patrol. When I was finally able to tell someone what had happened, they sent a car over to check it out. I had asked the officer to call me back and let me know if they found them, since I drive over there a lot. He later told me that by the time they got there, the men and the car were gone. But not even 5 minutes after they spoke to me, another woman called in, had the same stories as me in that same location. I was advised not to drive over by the park at night anymore. I had no idea that it was not safe at the time, and I've never taken that exit at night since. When I told my parents, my mom cried and my dad was crazy angry, but they were both proud of me for not stopping. There was also a new rule instituted in our family, boyfriend included, that we had to text someone when we were on our way home. So scary guys at the park, let's not meet. Unknown door opener. Hey, what's up, you guys? This just happened last night, and I don't know exactly what to make of it. I'm an 18-year-old dude who lives at home with his mom. I know that sounds lame, but I love living with my mom. We don't live in the house I grew up in, but we are in the same neighborhood as my grandma's house, and only a minute away from all my aunts and uncles and cousins. It's always been a nice and happy area for me, because I grew up around here. To say it plainly, I love this place, and I feel comfortable almost everywhere in the city. Nothing bad has happened to me or any of my family members while we lived in this town. It's close to the Gulf of Mexico, and it's full of chemical plants and thus workers from chemical plants and their families. Most people mind their own business and have a lot of respect for hard work and integrity, but there are some crazies, I guess. There was a body found in a storage unit not too terribly long ago. It was a woman who was murdered by her husband. He wasn't charged because he committed suicide or had in some other way passed since. A man who used to work at the same power plant I work at now was arrested for killing a woman with his car and driving away. The point being, shit goes bad sometimes here, but most of the times it's all okay. That's why I think this event is a little shocking to me still. It was a typical Thursday. I woke up at 7, went to work, and got off at 4. I went home and did all the normal stuff I do. I took a shower, played some video games, smoked a little weed, and ate dinner. Pretty good evening so far. My mom's friend April came over and stayed for a couple hours. She lives a block away and walked, but didn't want to be alone in the dark. My mom told me at about 9 p.m. she was walking April back to her house and that it would only take a second. I said, "Alright, see you soon." And they left. No more than a minute later, I thought I heard tapping on my window, but it was so light and inconsistent that I still don't know if anyone was actually tapping on my window. I still felt a little paranoid, and so I turned on some music to distract myself. I turned it down a minute or two later when I thought I heard my back door open. It was very loud because of 1, how old it is, and 2, we always kept the spare key in the lock which jangles every time it's opened. I turned my music off and didn't make another noise for a minute. I didn't hear anything. I know someone opened it. I know someone was inside my house. I could feel it, but I didn't hear footsteps or a voice or anything. It was silent. I was kind of scared, but I quickly told myself to grab the knife I keep in my desk drawer. I did so, and felt a little dumb because I figured I was just being paranoid. Better safe than sorry, I guess. Once again, it was silent for a while. I thought that if I acted like I had the upper hand over him, he'd be intimidated or scared, so I stood up and walked out my bedroom, knife in hand. I don't know why, but I whistled. Just one note. I took a few steps forward. I was about to turn the corner and the back door would be in view. I stopped again and whistled once more, still thinking I was big and tough. I was about to walk around the corner, and then I heard something that made my hair stand up. I heard someone whistle back at me, clearly coming from my living room. I was terrified. I peered around the corner and no one was there. The door was closed, but unlocked. I don't know if I left it unlocked or not. I truly can't remember. My mom came home a few minutes later and I didn't tell her, because I don't know. It's just weird and doesn't make sense. I don't know what to think about it or what to do about it. Crazy guy in the school bathroom intimidated me. So I first met this guy last month. I was having an anxiety attack because I was about to dance with my classmates for the morning exercises in the school stage, and my school principal saw me, and then she asked the guy to accompany me to the clinic, so he did. I thanked him for accompanying me, but he didn't reply. I also asked his name, but he didn't reply as well. He just had a blank, emotionless expression on his face. It kinda weirded me out. Now, we have met again, but this time it's in the washroom. I saw him standing near the urinals and I said hi. He was just standing there and didn't reply, and he's not doing anything, not even pissing. He had the same blank expression on his face. Then while I was in the stall doing my business, he started banging and punching on the door, and I was like, "Hey, what's the problem?" So I just stopped doing my business, got out of the stall to confront him, and he was staring at me. And this time he was giving me the evil eye and was clenching his fist. So I simply ignored him because I am 100% sure he was going to hurt me physically. When I got out of the washroom, I ran back to the classroom as fast as I could and let out a sigh of relief because he didn't follow me. I didn't tell my teacher because I was so scared and creeped out. Instead, I asked the school janitors if they know who this guy was. They said they'd never seen him before anywhere in the school campus, which I found was very weird because the guy was wearing school uniform, but not an ID. Creepy guy who physically threatened me in the school toilet. Let's not meet. Half asleep and crazy. This happened recently to me, but I figured I'd post this. It was a warm afternoon and I was half asleep. I didn't move from my couch and of course I didn't want to sleep. I had work in, well, a 5 to 10 shift. Being me, I was happy for the short shift and wasn't too keen on driving due to having 4 hours of sleep. I was fine at work, did my job and clocked out around 11 p.m. due to no coverage. I was wobbling out of the store and no one seemed to notice my current state. Still, I drove home down a much darker road than normal. I usually had 7 to 4 shifts, never night shifts, so I was pretty terrified. I hated the dark and usually I get paranoid around this time. Well, I saw something off the side of the road. A car was completely destroyed from what I can guess was a crash. I reported it to the police. They said to stay in the area. As I waited, I saw 2 figures walk towards me. One had a limp and I flashed my lights. They stopped dead in their tracks. "Hello?" yelled a feminine voice. Hi, is this your car?" I asked back. She explained that they almost hit someone crossing the road, and the 2 were hurt. Me being the nicest guy in the world, I got out of my car and picked up the limping one in fear something was broken. They sat in my car and called their parents from my phone, since theirs were in the car somewhere. Once all was done, and we waited, and then a man appeared. A silhouette of a man stood in front of my car. I started to make note of what he wore: plaid shirt, suspenders, and a torn pair of jeans. He motioned for me. Stupidly, I did. "Those bitches almost killed me," he said, pointing towards the mangled car. I nodded and let him walk towards my car. He tried to open the back door. Now I am pretty smart awake. Half asleep is a total different story. "You ever kill a man?" I asked, not thinking in the slightest. He turned around with the most intense eyes, and I gave the most concerned look in my life. "Why, you ask?" he asked curiously. "I'd die happier knowing you'd be more professional with my death," I answered. "I can promise you, you'll be the last just to see my craftsmanship." As he turned away, I, being stupid, did something completely heroic and fucking creepy. I got closer to him and said, "The voices in my head want me to peel your face off." He stopped and walked away. The police caught him after I gave a description of the perp to them. He was wanted for breaking parole anyways. The whole time though, all he would say was, "Why are you arresting me? The voices are in his head." In the end, I learned that the man who had the 2 girls' addresses and all was from stalking them on Facebook. They were going to meet him, but the moron didn't know where he was. The girls were grateful and we kept in touch. I had one question though. What the fuck is wrong with me? The woman on my porch. When I was about 10 or 11 years old, I shared a room with my older brother who was around 15. We lived in a suburb area in New York. Not the greatest area, but not riddled with crime either. There are 2 windows in my room, one that overlooks the backyard, and one that connects to the front porch. It came in quite handy for my brother to sneak out and meet with friends. If you step out the window, you are on the porch, so anyone on the porch can access this window. I was never bothered by that thought, because quite honestly, it had never crossed my mind. My bed was touching this window, while my brother's bed was perpendicular to mine. It was an odd setup, but that's besides the point. Now this was before we had any sort of smartphones or laptop to keep ourselves occupied, so on nights when we weren't sleepy, we would stay up talking to each other and making dumb games to pass time. This event took place during the summer. We stayed up into the late hours of the night, perks of having no school. It was probably around 2 a.m., and eventually, we're playing a game where one of us was the goalkeeper and the other was taking a shot. We would both say at the time either left, center, or right. If the goalkeeper guessed the same as the one taking the shot, he would get a point, and if the person taking the shot said a position other than what the goalie said, they got a point. We went for a couple rounds of this, and I was beating his ass at it, even though that's irrelevant. I don't remember what round we were on, but we did our 3, 2, 1 countdown. My brother, the goalkeeper, said left. I, the shooter, said center. The voice from outside the porch window said, "Left." Me and my brother froze. We had the shade down, but my mom had left the porch light on, so there was the only light illuminating our room. The dim porch light coming in from the borders of the shade. At the time in my house was my mother on the opposite side of the house, my sister the room over, my dad in the basement, and me and my brother shitting our pants practically. We waited for what seemed like an hour, but was probably only like 35 to 40 seconds, and we heard a giggle and a playful knock at the window. "Let's go another round, come on boys," the voice said in a cheerful, playful tone. Honestly, I want to say it was a scary voice, and sounded menacing, but it didn't. It sounded like a woman, not too old, but not too young, and just normal. Like a normal sounding voice. Nothing off about it besides where it was coming from, and the time it came. Me and my brother were seriously freaked out, and I was about to break down because of how close I was to this woman. The thought that all I had to do was lift the shade, and I'd be face to face with this person scared the shit out of me. That made me go still and stiff. And as I just looked into Medusa's eyes, after a while of me and my brother not responding, my brother started slowly moving from his bed to the door, as to not make any noise. As my brother was tiptoeing to the door, the sounds of nails being ran down a window started. It was very slow from top to bottom. At that point, my brother made it to the door. He looked back at me and brought his finger to his lip, gesturing for me to keep quiet. Once the nails stopped running down my window, I heard her light footsteps make their way off my porch and disappear. I lay there for an eternity, not moving, until my brother returned and I saw my mom move hastily by my door, making her way to the front door. The porch light flipped off, and I was left in darkness with my brother waiting in the doorway for my mom's return. I heard my mom call my dad up the stairs and his groggy, annoyed footsteps coming upstairs. They talked and came in, me and my brother's room, and we relayed what happened. Apparently, my mom caught sight of this lady turning out of our driveway on foot behind some tall bushes. Thank God we had a long driveway, otherwise my mom probably would have thought we were crazy. Considering no harm was done besides leaving me terrified of my window, my parents didn't call the police. They just thought it was really weird and stayed up the rest of the night to make sure she didn't return. I'm 17 years old now. My brother is in college and I have the room to myself. My bed still touches the window because I'm too lazy to move the rest of the furniture in my room so I can move my bed. The shade to that window has not been opened since that incident and probably never will.